What's up?
Greetings and salutations, and welcome to Hacker Slash. If you're joining us again, welcome back. What's up? If this is your first time listening, welcome to the party. We are a horror movie review podcast dedicated to telling you whether a movie is a hack,
a total joke, a waste of time,
or a slash.
Totally killer, pun intended.
We believe horror is for everyone, and as such, we're rating these movies with the perspectives we've gained from our varying walks of life and the flavors of fear we fancy most. My name is Chris. I'm your friendly neighborhood slasher enthusiast. This week I'm joined by the Superfly Space Guy, Mac.
What's up?
And the classic horror connoisseur, Sean.
What's up?
What's up?
What's up? What's up?
This week we're commemorating April Fool's Day by checking out a prolific horror parody.
And if you support the show, you'll also get to hear our B-side at the end of this episode, where we take some wild guesses at what hilarious parodies the new Scary Movie might get into.
4 years after Scream uncovered the meta of horror, Dimension Films released a Wayans Brothers film that took things a step further. The project was designed as a full-blown parody, one that wouldn't just reference the slashers that dominated the 90s, but would rather unravel them, spoof them, and push their tropes to absurd extremes. The story follows a group of teenagers who, 1 year after covering up a hit and run, find themselves targeted by a clumsy masked killer with a knack for bad timing. This week, we're talking about Scary Movie. Who's seen this one before?
Seen this before. I owned this movie on DVD. I think it's still somewhere. I could probably go looking for it right now. I have watched this so many times to the point where when I watch it again and people say certain lines, I can remember them in their voices because it's just ingrained in me.
Oh, yeah. I love the Scary Movie franchise. I've probably seen this one at least a dozen times or more. And it's just like the franchise, this movie, the franchise, it's a fun and for the most part hilarious franchise, right? It's poking fun at so many great horror movies and playing heavily into the tropes that we know and love. But yeah, you're right. Like people just remember this one so much so that they often get it confused with Scream itself, which is hilarious.
Okay, I'm glad we're all gathered here, because I'm 99.9% sure I've mentioned several times on this podcast how I had never seen Scary Movie, ever in my life. Up until around this time last year, or maybe it was a little post this time last year. Allie sat me down, finally watched it, showed me Scary Movie 1, then Scary Movie 5, nothing in between. And listen, I went into that movie feeling a little bit skeptical. Not because it's a parody, but because I felt like I had already seen the whole thing through like a cultural osmosis, right? There's a lot of jokes. There's a lot of moments that have been memed, clipped, and quoted to death over the last 25 years. So it seemed, it seemed impossible that any part of it could still surprise me.
That's interesting. You know, I think it's tough to come at it from a different perspective because I've seen it so much, because I have such a strong, I don't want to say like attachment to it, but it was part of my younger years of being an adult. You know, it was at the time where a lot of the stuff you watch, you're going to remember. And going into watching it again, I honestly did not expect anything different. I thought, I know what to expect. I've seen it so many times. Nothing's going to catch me off guard. I'm just going to vibe with it. That's 100% what I thought was going to happen.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. You know, the difference here is, Mac, you and I watched this in our youth, right? We watched it around the time that this came out, and that was a time, right? Like a much different time than we are in right now. And so what I would be curious to see is, like, as we progress through talking about this film, is how Chris's perspective was on this movie, maybe knowing some of the jokes, right? But watching it for the first time, like now, versus watching it for the first time in 2000.
Yeah, that's such a big distinction here, right? You are young men or young boys watching this when this kind of humor is in its heyday and is really fucking funny, poking fun at things that are in like very recent history. And I'm watching this as a grumpy old person in my 30s. You know what I mean? Like it's just different. And also, I think not just the style of humor, right? But the jokes themselves, it's hard to distinguish for me. Is it funny or not funny? And then even after that, is it, if it isn't funny, is it not funny because that humor just doesn't like stick these days? Or is it not funny because I've seen this shit over and over and over from being memed? And right. I think that is a little bit of a struggle, but I'm actually really happy to share that while I thought it was impossible that any of it could still surprise me, I was actually wrong. this movie managed to make me laugh out loud in some moments. Not as much. I think if I watched this when this first came out, I would have been fucking hooting and hollering along with the next person. But I remember distinctly that this movie came out, American Pie came out, and Not Another Teen Movie came out. And that was all in the era of film where I was a very sheltered child and was not allowed to watch it. I was like 10 years old when this thing came out. But I'll say like the slapstick comedy and this whole kind of energy really is not my style. But what this movie does really well is it lovingly skewers classic slasher tropes. And as a slasher enthusiast, oh, that does it for me. I'm actually glad I got to sit down and watch it with Ali last year. And it makes me excited to see what else is coming in the franchise.
Yeah, it's really interesting, right? To just reflect on like how you felt or remember feeling when watching this movie when it first came out. And I know like a lot of comedies don't hold up over time, especially movies that are making fun of like pop culture in specific time periods like this, right? Like some comedies, they just don't hold up. But I felt a lot of things while watching this movie. I truly did. I felt like there were still a good amount of moments that also made me laugh out loud. But I did also feel those moments that were really cringy, right? Like those moments that may have been funny in 2000, but don't feel right anymore. And that's just, that's just the way it is. Like this movie is filled with very crude humor. It is the kind of humor that appeals to teenagers. And I think that's what this movie was aiming for, right? Like it was definitely, like you said, coming out of the age of American Pie. This is the type of shit like sex jokes, gender jokes, like it was just all on the table. It felt like nothing was really off limits. And that was just what was popular at the time. And so some of these jokes did feel like they still held up. It was still kind of funny. It was tasteful. And then some were like, that one might have went a little bit too far or just didn't land, There was a lot of that, and this whole experience reminds me of a particular time in my life. This reminds me of the early 2000s, watching Comedy Central like always. I remember watching this on Comedy Central. I remember watching a lot of stand-up specials. I mean, like endless stand-up, South Park, The Daily Show, all sorts of stuff on Comedy Central throughout the 2000s. And this like fits in. You mentioned Not Another Teen Movie. I know that movie more than I know She's All That.
Oh my
right?
God, what?
But also people know this movie more than they know Scream. There are some people that are that way too about this.
That's wild to me. I hate it. Thanks.
It's just a time of life. It's just like a phase, I guess, that I was in where that stuff was still really funny. I'm thinking of right now, like literally the comedians I would have seen doing stand-up specials before this movie was queued up on Comedy Central when it was in syndication or however you call that, like later on. It's an experience that is nostalgic on one part. Like you mentioned, Chris, there are some moments that legit make you laugh however many years later. And like you've both mentioned, there's some parts where you're kind of like, I'm too old for that to be funny. It's just not funny anymore. There was those moments you've mentioned not landing. There's some jokes here that watching this, you go, what was that even referencing? I don't understand where that was coming from. It just kind of seems like out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And listen, obviously a movie that is so heavily fucking coded in pop culture comedy from the year 2000 is going to have shit that's not funny right now. And obviously this is also all pre-Me Too movement. So maybe some sensibilities were not very fucking sensible, right? However, what I love about this is that even I think in some of its worst moments, this movie manages to still not lose all of its charm. And I think that's a very fine line to walk. And listen, the other thing that really surprised me about this, I obviously knew, I think, most of the movies that were going to be parodied in this, but I was pleasantly surprised how fucking cohesive it felt. Because sometimes when you get these things that are just a mashup of every fucking genre film, it can feel like too much. But in this one, yes, there was a lot going on, and I could distinctly identify, okay, this is that, and that from the early 2000s. It's kind of like, all right. But it actually made sense, which, okay, it shouldn't be surprising. And I realized this because how many fucking songs that are hits share the same fucking beat or 3 chords or whatever. You know what I'm saying? But it still fucking works. And as somebody who loves covers and mashups, this shit really did it for me.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I don't think I can really be I don't think I can really be surprised watching this one anymore, right? Like, I think it's one of those movies where I've seen so many times. I know all the jokes. Like, I know what it's doing. I know what it's making fun of, what it's poking fun at. So I don't feel like I'm super surprised anymore when I watch this one. I think between this one and Scary Movie 2, I have probably seen these movies so many times. I watched this movie even just a few months ago because my wife and I were just talking about it, and we're like, oh, let's just throw it on, right? So it is something that, like, I'm really well versed in, but I do think, it can be, if you are somebody that watched it a long time ago and hasn't watched it in 20 years or whatever it is, like, I feel like you could be disappointed with some of the way that it plays so heavily into some of the themes that just don't feel as good as it did back then, because there are a couple of moments and a couple of characters that I feel like now don't feel as right and don't feel as good as maybe it did back in 2000. And then there's some tropes that they play into that I think are absolutely hilarious. So depending on how long it's been since you've watched it and how you've grown as a person and things like that, right? There may be some disappointments in this movie.
Yeah, I would say there's plenty in here that I'm curious if I were to show this to someone maybe even significantly younger than me, who has seen some of the source material. Like I think maybe one of my nephews in particular, because he's been going on this trend of like learning about the iconic slashers. Like he just got through all the Halloween movies. I think they're working through Friday the 13th. I think if we worked through some of that and then showed him Scary Movie, knowing that he's grown up with Gen Z and Gen Z's movement right now, I'm just wondering how all this would click for him. I think that would be interesting because there's still a lot in here that I appreciate from A, growing up around this time, but also B, this being subject matter that I fucking absolutely have lived my life loving this whole time, even the Wayans brothers separately from that. And with a fucking horror comedy, with a parody, we can't exactly unpack how fucking scary something is. But I think the question here is, how many times did you laugh out loud? Because it happened to me twice that I actually laughed out loud.
Wow. I think I laughed out loud more than that even on this viewing. So maybe that says something about me, but it just took me back to all the times watching this, laughing at stuff and looking at that thinking, I didn't even know all the references back then. And so now there's even additional comedy. There's things seen in new light, like a P. Diddy joke. That's even funnier now than it was back then.
Oh,
true.
Too soon?
I don't know if it's too soon. I think it's true, though. Like, there are things that you maybe not that one, but there are things, to your point, that you may have missed because you were too young to maybe get it, right? And now that watch is like different because you definitely, you're catching on to some of the subtleties that you didn't. It's like, to put an example, like it's like if you were a kid watching Shrek or a parent watching Shrek. You know what I mean? Like, there are things that are going to blow over the kid's like head, right? They're just not going to get it, but the parents are going to be like, wait a second, that was for me. And so, like, there are moments like that. But yeah, although titled Scary Movie, this movie is far from scary for sure. It's like you said, a horror comedy. It's a parody. It plays really heavily into that comedy aspect. Even the horror elements are either like super campy or intentionally absurd and ridiculous. So yeah, I don't find anyone being scared of the film. I think you're just meant to have a good time watching a movie really play in and poke fun at the tropes that we love watching in every slasher film.
When you think of other movies of this particular type of genre, specifically like this type of comedy, all I think of is like The Naked Gun and Airplane and stuff like that. And even this is different from that in its tone and execution. There's fourth wall breaks here that are way more fun than I think some of the stuff we got in Airplane.
For sure.
The best part about those, though, Leslie Nielsen was a dramatic actor. We've talked about this in the past, and plays those roles like very straight. And we have some of that here where they're playing them just like really dramatically, but then they'll do a fourth wall break, or they'll be incredibly goofy and over the top, or make references that we all know we're in on as viewers. So it's weird. It's like this combination of all these different types of comedy in one place. Of course, we're referencing horror movies. That's the whole point of this thing. So you're not going to be like 100% original. That's the idea. But even as a comedy, it's a mixture of things.
Yeah. It's a good point because there are some really great parody movies out there. Like you mentioned Airplane, right? We've talked about Not Another Teen Movie. We've talked about all those types of movies, and like those are out there. And that's essentially kind of like what this one is doing. But at this point in time, there really wasn't something like this specifically for horror. Like, you had Young Frankenstein, but that isn't the same as what this movie is doing, right? This movie is really, it's playing with the theme of Scream, but it's throwing in so many other elements from so many other popular horror franchises up until that time. And yeah, you just hadn't seen anything like this at the time. And hell, there are even, we've mentioned it already, there are even people out there that saw this before even seeing Scream. And so for someone to be introduced to the concept through this movie first is mind-boggling. It is there, man. And this movie was its own thing.
Okay, listen, I don't disagree with either of you, but I want to be very clear and give this movie, well, not this movie, but I'm going to pause for a moment and give another movie some flowers. Because long before Scary Movie ran, Student Bodies walked.
Oh,
Student Bodies from 1981. That is a straight up parody slasher comedy to the point where it has the breather, it has the horse head bookends, it had the fucking rubber chicken, it had the phone hanging up. Did you just hang up? No, I just said click.
You're right.
Yeah, that movie in my mind is. And listen, and I know that Scary Movie is hilarious and it is what it is. Student Bodies, I still fucking laugh out loud a lot with.
Yeah.
And I think it's because some of it's also more subtle humor that I think I tend to gravitate versus like more prop based or sex based. Even that movie has plenty of sex jokes in it. But man, I want to throw it back to Student Bodies. We did it on the podcast. We've already done it once before. I'll put a link in the show notes to it and see if we can find it. But holy shit, that movie was a great parody.
That's such a great call out because I fucking forgot about that movie. And you're right. That is a great, great film. Dang.
And to be clear, though, like parody dates back to the early 1900s, right? Even then, less and less so, right? So, you know, Sean, you mentioned Young Frankenstein. Student Bodies came around in the 80s. But then we had, which is not quite the same vein or what we think of now, but we had Abbott and Costello and the Universal Monsters, like Abbott and Costello and Frankenstein and Boris Karloff and the Invisible Man and all that stuff. So horror and comedy go way far back, but I think obviously like Student Bodies doing what it did for parodies. And I just don't know why these two aren't in the same conversation more.
It's a good point. And you brought up Scary Movie, I think, when we were talking about Student Bodies, because you still, you know, back then you hadn't seen this yet, but you knew of Student Bodies and I hadn't seen that. And I can definitely see how the two overlap. And I think those two are actually much closer than a lot of the other parodies that we've mentioned. Something like Not Another Teen Movie is of the same age as this film. And so a lot of the comedy seems very similar. Again, it's that like early 2000s Comedy Central kind of humor. It's got its own particular feeling. If you know, you know, I guess is how I feel about it. But even then, as a parody, it is much closer to Student Bodies. I'm surprised we didn't get a Student Bodies reference. And if we did, maybe I just didn't see it.
Yeah, I don't know that they did.
I'm always going to fucking die laughing with the title cards for Student Body going and is like marking time. And then it gives all the holidays and it says Jamie Lee Curtis's birthday. If we had gotten the Jamie Lee Curtis cameo that we were supposed to get in Scary Movie, in my mind, that would have linked the two. But instead, we'll just go with Halloween and Halloween. I think, you know, there was a night in Student Bodies that takes place on Halloween. What a great fucking movie. Wow. That movie makes me so happy. Maybe I'll watch it to decompress before I go to sleep tonight.
No, you're making me want to watch this film again. And it's been a long ass time, so maybe it is time.
It absolutely is. Maybe we could do a little watch party or something.
We should. That would be great.
The other thing about this, though, is, you know, much like Student Bodies and the way that fucking movie wraps up, the ending of this movie absolutely fucking works. And it's hard to really capture what I was expecting going into the ending of this movie. Because again, when you see a movie and you feel like you know every single punchline, I will say that there was an element of the movie and its ending that surprised me.
I hope it was the sickest of references that had nothing to do with horror. That's what I'm hoping caught you off guard.
Probably. We're talking, yes. Well, I'm assuming that we're talking about the same thing.
Yeah, it is. Upon rewatch now, I don't think it's something that I put together as heavily back when this was, you know, brand new, because I hadn't yet seen the movie that this was referencing, because I just hadn't got around to it yet in my watch list. And now watching it, you're just like, oh my God, that's actually really well done for a spoof movie from 2000.
Mm-hmm. I think that's the thing, right? Because The ending is kind of fun, right? I think we get a big reveal, and to what we're kind of poking at, right? I think the interesting thing is if you watch the movie that this is making fun of, if you watch Scream prior to this, right, like you're probably not going to see the ending coming. But if you have seen the vice versa, it might confuse you, it might mess with you and think on how you think it ends. And like, so there's it's really kind of fun that the way that they make this story unfold and the big reveal at the end and how this thing wraps up. So I think it's kind of great no matter how you go into this movie.
Yeah, I think the ending of this is just over the top, and it has that final gag that sticks with you. And I'm so excited to see how that actually shakes out and impacts our ratings here. But before we dive into that, Sean, how would you describe the gore score?
Yeah, this one has plenty of gore and violence. Like, it's got tons of stuff happening, right? Hell, we even see body parts being stuck through people's ears. Like, we see a lot of stuff in this movie. But for as much violence as we see in this movie, it's mostly done in a heavy comedic undertone. And because of this, I feel like this is stuck in the medium-low gore score territory.
And what about the animal report?
Happy to say we're all good in the hood here.
Well, let's go ahead and get into our ratings then. Scary Movie from the year 2000. Was it a hack or a slash?
What can we say about Scary Movie? When you really think about it, it's basically the equivalent of a fart joke at a funeral, right? Like, it's crude, it's inappropriate, but also somehow kind of funny. And Scary Movie from 2000, I feel like, is a horror spoof that really took a chainsaw to the genre's biggest hits at the time. You have Scream, you have I Know What You Did Last Summer, you have The Blair Witch Project, and it left behind a blood-splattered, pop culture-riddled mess that I feel like, against all odds, somehow still manages to entertain after all of these years. But let's address the elephant in the room, because some of the humor in this movie has aged like a gallon of milk left in the sun, right? Like, and that's just facts, right? There are some jabs, I think at transgender people that I don't know is going to be super great this time, right? Watching it in this time, and maybe not even at that time, but it just doesn't feel the same. There's, poking fun at mental disabilities, that feels very cringe, and probably those are the worst parts of this movie. But a reminder, if nothing else, of the early 2000s and how different that time really was. But then there's these whole tropes that I feel like it still plays into some stereotypes that are a little bit controversial, but somehow still holds up better than expected, and you still have a really good time with it, and it's funny, and it's a little bit more tasteful. But I'll tell you, where Scary Movie really shines is in its relentless satire of those horror tropes. And you got from Carmen Electra as Drew, and that hilariously prolonged opening scene to the iconic "What's up" scene with Ghostface, right? This movie knows exactly what made these films work, and it drags them into absurdity. And I feel like Scary Movie is nothing but a time capsule of both brilliance and cringe when you really look at it, right? It's an artifact of an era when nothing was off limits, for better and worse. It may not be a perfect killer, but I feel like when it comes to horror comedy spoofs, it's still a slash in my books.
I'm right there with you, Sean. This is something that is just like built into my experience growing up with it for whatever reason. And when you look at the cast itself is just fantastic, and it's a good time. And I would watch them honestly put on any sort of act. The Wayans brothers here, I mean, the whole family gets together and just can pump out some gold. And I think this is evidence of that. But we've got other people who were hip at the time. Shannon Elizabeth is, of course, in this film. Carmen Electra, of course, in this film. Because why? Because they were huge at the time. So why not get them in there? We've got SNL comedy legend Sherry O'Terry in here. Because why? Because it's so 2000. And I think it just works as a movie from 2000. Would this work as a movie from today? Like you've mentioned, no. A lot of these jokes are dated. And that's just the truth of it. We look back at this and there's moments where you think, oh, that's a bit rough. That shouldn't have happened, or we wouldn't do that like that anymore. And I think that's good. Of course, as a culture, as a society, we're growing. Our comedy changes. The great thing about comedy is technically nothing is off limits, but you know where to point it. It's a tool that you have to know how to use and when to use it. And I think when we use that correctly here, you have some laugh out loud moments. You have some good fun. If you are alive during this time, if you were a teenager or an adult, you can get a lot of the things that are mentioned. If not, I'm really curious if people still find this funny, if they don't understand a lot of those references. But I do. And it's something that came out at a time in my life where I was really into watching a lot of comedies, and it takes me back there. For me, this is 1 part nostalgia, 2 part. It's got some good gags. The physical comedy here is really good. It's fun. But then the one-liners are also really solid. They're delivered completely deadpan in many cases, and that's what makes them, I think, even funnier. So there's a lot to love. There's a lot to, forgive if you want to. But in the end, overall, it was a slash for me.
Listen, this movie is no Shaun of the Dead. This movie is no Tucker and Dale versus Evil. This movie, for me, still isn't even Student Bodies, but it was a little fucking funny. Some of the jokes, like you both have mentioned, right? They're rough by today's standards. And when you're rough by today's standards, it's one thing to look at this with your nose up and think like, oh, what the fuck were you thinking? I think it just represents a society. What the fuck, right? Because even when I was younger, okay, you show me a movie that has a fucking gay joke in it, I still don't like it, and I still didn't fucking like it when I was younger. Like, those are the things that make you feel othered and uncomfortable. That being said, this movie manages to not feel like it's completely punching down the entire time. And I think that's what separates it in its tone. There's a lot in here that I didn't expect to like, but there's a lot that I laughed with. There's a lot that I laughed at. Yeah, I kind of fucking get how this became a whole fucking franchise. It does have the kind of slapstick humor comedy that is really just not my thing, but I can still appreciate a lot of the good for what it is. And while this movie is a total fucking joke, it's at least a funny one. So it still gets a slash from me. And with that, Scary Movie from 2000 has earned a universal slash on this April Fool's Day. But there's a lot more to discuss when we return from break. If you are like everyone else in the rest of the world who's actually seen this before me, please let us know how you would rate this and share your thoughts about it in our Discord server. You can find the link in the show notes below. But when we return from our break, we're going to dive deep into the spoiler zone territory, unpack the movie it parodies, and also unpack some of those rougher jokes. We'll see you in a bit.
Are you tired of living in fear that your enhancements might not survive a close encounter with a knife-wielding maniac? Do you worry that your implants are more vulnerable than a group of clueless teens at a summer camp? Well, fear no more, because Slasher Shield implants are here to make sure your assets stay intact, even when your survival odds don't. Our patented titanium tatas technology ensures your breast implants can withstand even the most aggressive stab wounds, because let's be honest, Ghostface always aims center mass. And for the gentleman, our Final Guy fortification means your below-the-belt investments can handle even the most brutal slasher showdown. Jason may have a machete, you've got indestructibles. But wait, there's more. With our scream-proof silicone, you won't just survive, you'll thrive. We've tested our products against all the classics. Michael's butcher knife, deflected. Chucky's tiny stabby hands, not a scratch. A poorly aimed chainsaw, please, that's child's play. So don't be another helpless horror victim. Fortify your fun bags and safeguard your sausage. With Slasher Shield implants, the only thing getting slashed is ticket sales to the next sequel. Slasher Shield implants, because even if you're expendable, your enhancements shouldn't be.
Welcome back, folks. You're now entering the spoiler zone for Scary Movie from the year 2000, which has earned a universal slash. We have a lot to unpack here, but before we get into the specifics of our ratings, let's go through those kills.
Well, with a total of 22 kills, there are bound to be some great ones. We have everything from implant impalements to getting stabbed in the ear with a dick. So I gotta know, what's your favorite Scary Movie kill?
Okay. There's a lot in here. I know we're going to get through most of them, but shout out to Double D Drew Decker, because of course Carmen Electra's name has fucking double D's. The opening scene of this movie was so fucking great. I absolutely loved it. When you have the opening of fucking Scream, which is such a great and fantastic cold open to a movie, it honestly just sent a chill down my spine, not in a terrible way, but in a, wow, this is exciting. I really fucking love how they captured the magic here. But to then escalate things to have this Baywatch comedy with Carmen Electra, then
running,
to get the fucking stab with the fucking silicone implants, and then for her dad to be getting a blowjob from her mom, so he hits her with his own car. Fucking hilarious. This
There's nothing
was
worse.
one of the moments where I laughed out loud.
Yeah, for sure. It's an iconic kill. It's an iconic scene, right? Like it's an iconic scene making fun of an iconic scene. And it's like like you said, it's one of the more well-known scenes in this whole movie. And for that whole kill, not only to get that like hilariously prolonged death, but also to get the implant being ripped out. And then, like you said, being hit by a car by your own dad who can't pay attention because he's too busy getting roadhead from your mom. That's fucked.
Yeah, it really is. It's fucking terrible. But okay, the stack up of scenes here from Casey Becker to Drew Decker, it's kind of like game recognizes game, you know?
This is part of the movie, though, that I love, that they went like really, really close to the source material and tried not to deviate too much. And that's what I think makes it such a good spoof in those moments, is they're like, we're legit just going to do that, but in our way. And I think I love that.
Yeah. That should have been the Stab movie that played in Scream 2.
Oh my God. Should have been. It should have been.
Just that clip from this film.
Yeah. You had to do some time travel since it came out in 97, but you know, give us a future Scream movie where Scary Movie is a Stab movie in the Scream universe.
Dang, we're getting wild. Absolutely wild.
It's funny to me because I think that one is one of like the best kills of the film. It's actually one of the funniest ones as well. A lot of the other ones didn't really land for me. Like they happen, they're fine. Kind of like any other slasher body count padding kills, they're okay. A couple of them though, like you mentioned, are actually funny. And a couple of them are also good references, even if they're not funny. I think when we get to Tina's kill with the garage door, it wasn't funny, but it was a reference. And I was like, okay, I'll give you credit for making a reference, but not for being a funny moment at all. But when you get to all the stoners hanging out, it wasn't even about the kill. It was about everything leading up to that moment that I enjoyed. The kill itself was like, all right, that's fine. Those guys were whatever. As long as you leave Shorty around, I'm okay with whatever else you do in the situation. But the lead up, the was up moment, the hanging out together, all of that was so good. And then to take him out with the rap thing, like that was cool. It was whatever.
Yeah. I also love that it was like this innocent, I'm just out here, you know, trying to fucking throw a sick rhyme. And he inadvertently fucking kills everybody else in the room. And Shorty's reaction to that was absolutely fucking great. I do acknowledge the first time I saw this movie, I laughed like fucking crazy at that. This time around, I giggled at it.
It's just one of those moments where you like think about it. Like for me, like I just remember after this movie coming out, there were so many "was up" moments. That's how you would just greet your friends. You may get on the phone and call your friend and they'd be like, hello. And you'd be like, "Was up?" Like it was just a thing. You know what I mean? And for a movie to be able to do that is really fucking cool. But let me tell you, one of my favorite kills in this movie is just such a great campy moment, and it's Heather's kill. And it's because it's not that she's just getting stabbed to death, because that's not the fun part of the kill. The fun part of the kill was there was just something absolutely hilarious about the fact that Gail Hailstorm was trying to interview her as she's getting murdered. So she's sitting there getting murdered by Ghostface, and Gail's sitting there on live TV saying, "Can you tell us what you're feeling right now?" That shit was fucking gold right there. That was a laugh out loud moment right there.
That was really, really fucking good. Gail Hailstorm all around was just fucking hilarious. Absolutely loved hers. I also love when Gail kills another teenager because she says, "I'm Gail Hailstorm, author of You're Dead, I'm Rich." And then she's describing that the events left one teen dead. She's annoyed by the teens in back of her. She said, "That's it." That left two teens dead. Fucking great. Wow. I also want to shout out, though, another death that I loved that was in second place for me was the actual other time that I still laughed out loud. That's Buffy. Shannon Elizabeth. We saw Shannon Elizabeth and Jack Frost before this movie came out. And I just loved her talking all that fucking shit the entire time. And it wasn't even just her fucking shit talking back to Ghostface. It was also Ghostface's fucking reaction to her. They played off of each other so well. And then for him to fucking decapitate her, she's still talking all that shit.
She's still talking.
That shit, I don't know why, it still fucking got me.
Yeah. It's a great kill. It's so funny. I loved the fact that she kept talking shit after she was decapitated, and then she had to get thrown in the garbage. So fucking good.
Yeah, I also love though that she's named Buffy, and she plays kind of like the Tatum in Scream, but also Sarah Michelle Gellar's character from I Know What You Did Last Summer as the beauty queen.
Right. That is good. It really they're playing heavy into these fucking films. It's really great. It's really great.
The meta of that moment, I think, was also great because it was definitely like commentary on horror at the time where it's like, oh, we're tired of all this boring stuff. We've had 20, 30 years of it, whatever. These kills are so dated. Oh, that's what you're going to do? Like how lame, how boring, whatever.
Is this where I'm supposed to run? Oh, please, Mr. Killer. Again, to your point, right? Commenting on that, but also throwing back to Tatum. Please, Mr. Ghostface, I want to be in the sequel.
True.
So
very
good.
True. Yeah. Oh, man. Shorty getting killed, right? Like, he just got shot. But the fact that he got shot a couple times and his bullet hole wounds were smoking and he tried to hit that shit and get high, that is fucking gold. Shorty is fucking hilarious in this movie.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. There's something about him getting shot that I didn't love, but the commentary or him offering for her to hit it was actually very funny. Okay.
That was too.
Also, not that it was a death, but Ray's fake out death with a dick through the head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
Listen, that was Omar Epps in Scream 2 who had the knife in the ear through the bathroom stall. And I just thought their whole fucking play with Ray the entire time, it only made sense that it was a glory hole.
It only made sense. It was ridiculous. And so for me, and I don't know, I'm actually curious, Chris, to get your perspective on this, but like for me, Ray's character and the tropes that they were playing into, like the stereotypes and stuff of like, I don't know if we call it like the jock in the closet, right? Like I feel like that was obviously getting borderline, right? But also I think still kind of funny.
Yeah, what I thought was funny about it, and here's where I fall on it. I think I'm watching this now in my 30s, seeing.
Right.
I think if this would be different, I think I would have felt different if I saw this when I was younger and also in the closet and just, you know what I mean? Like it just wouldn't have been a good time.
True.
However, what I love is seeing this now, knowing how much fucking fan fiction is out there about Billy and Stu. So everybody is convinced that Billy and Stu were fucking that whole time in Scream. But this, and maybe they think that because the Scary Movie. Right? Maybe. I don't fucking know. But you cannot go on Etsy and search for Scream stickers without them fucking kissing or cuddling up next to each other or Matthew Lillard's head right behind Billy's. It's just a whole moment. Yes, there's a lot in this movie that plays on very negative stereotypes and very negative tropes, but it felt in some moments, and I think maybe that's because of Brenda's character, where it felt just light enough to be like, yeah, this is a little fucked up, but we're still trying to have fun with it and draw attention to it versus just punching down the whole fucking time.
Yeah.
But again, that's me as a completely different person. I think the other ways that you have to look at this, right, is even culturally being gay and closeted. I think people describe this a lot of different ways, right? My experience as a gay woman is very different from a gay man and someone who has to deal with any kind of stigma in their cultural circles or in their family circles, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot there to unpack that I'm also not an authority on being able to unpack. I can just tell you that Brenda was so fucking funny. It managed to like soothe it for me.
Yeah, for sure.
The best part about it is his character is honestly an entire brand of social media comedy now. There are these social media comedians, is the only way I can think about it. They put out skits, right? On YouTube, on Instagram, on whatever. And basically his character is who they're playing. Just over and over and over, all these different guys, where I love the fact that they're, the characters aren't apologetic. I love that. And that's obviously in contrast to his partner in crime, who is portrayed as hiding anything. He is, from the very beginning, twisting the shirt up, unapologetic. and out there and kind of brushes off anyone questioning anything. And I think that's what I always found so funny about him.
Yeah.
His kill was just really random and weird to me, but it was like, at the time you're like, again, fart joke at a funeral, like, oh, that's silly and funny. I'm going to laugh at that.
Right.
But I think the rest of his character is honestly the funniest part. Most of the things he says, the looks on his face. And again, this is that Airplane style comedy where you deliver these lines completely dramatically in most cases. And that's what makes it funnier.
Okay. One last one that I really want to draw attention to was this is the equivalent then of Ryan Phillippe's death in I Know What You Did Last Summer. And that's Greg.
Yep.
Greg getting killed at the beauty pageant while Shannon Elizabeth is doing her fucking monologue or her dramatic reading and everybody thinks it's real.
They're like, oh, that's pretty good.
Well, nobody thinks it's real because they think it's just her being fucking dramatic. Absolutely fucking hilarious. But to then see his bodies being swept up and cleaned up and the evidence being cleaned up behind them while they're fucking talking about it, fantastic.
It is great. It's such a great shout out.
I think it's even better because it's like a leg hanging out of a bag, It's not like we see his face or anything. It's just, nope.
Yeah, it's like half the body hanging out of the trash bag as he's dragging it down the hall.
Mm-hmm.
It's ridiculous.
Absolutely. And I think that actually takes me into some of the things that I fucking loved about this movie in terms of its production. And it's all the little nods to other movies, from little details in the set design to details in the props. Not that Greg's death is exactly related to that, but I think about the small dick pic and the I know written on it. I think about the handwritten letters of I know what you did last Halloween. And then she thinks about this fucking flashback to a great picnic. And she's like, no, and the note says, no, bitch, I'm talking about the guy you killed. But the handwriting looks identical to I Know What You Did Last Summer. So there's that. Yeah. There's even then in the opening scene, we have a Scream poster by the door in Carmen Electra or Drew Decker's home. There's all these little touches in here that really fucking make it come alive. And, last but not least, how can I fucking forget an incredible, iconic Halloween moment where she's in class before she gets that note. She looks outside and it's the Laurie seeing Michael outside the fucking school. And then he just like very quickly runs off.
Yep. Man. So many great moments, but I think like I'm even though there's questionable choices in the script, I feel like for me, I still have to give it up to the writing in this movie, because there were just some moments that we've been talking about when they're clearly poking fun at some pretty iconic moments in horror cinema, like you're talking about, Chris. And at the time that I feel like these were absolute fucking gold. Some of these still hold up as pure gold moments, and the people writing and making this film, I feel like really knew what made those scenes work in those respective films and found a super fun and ridiculous and absurdly clever way to work them into this film that just made for some great moments that have stood the test of time. So I got to give it up to the people writing some of this shit.
Some of the jokes really do read as people got together and just like had fun and made up jokes with each other. The moment when Shorty is covered in a blanket saying, I see dead people, and then breathes out the smoke is just brilliant, because that's the kind of joke I could see people making with each other in real life. And it's that type of humor that I think meshes well with the Ghostface in this film. Ghostface has some moments where we get great physical comedy, like you've mentioned, the tucking behind the tree out in the field, like, ooh, where do I go? The hiding in the house is so fantastic. Where am I calling you from? And the feet are sticking out, wiggling is just brilliant.
Oh, yeah.
So good.
I love so much about that. And I think the mask changes were also awesome. The stoned Ghostface is just a classic mask now, thanks to this movie. Well done. And there's just a lot of those moments where the character kind of exemplifies what this movie is trying to do, through whether it's through physical comedy, the stuff that they have him say, or just the wild antics that he gets up to that are unrelated to kills. I think a lot about Ghostface brings this whole film together in its ability to land jokes.
100%. And, I actually want to go back to the scene that you're talking about with Cindy on the phone with Ghostface, and Ghostface is asking if she knows where he is. And she's just hiding wherever. Anna Faris, what a gem. You two weren't on the episode, but Binks and I did the episode on Lover's Lane, which is the movie that Anna Faris did right before doing Scary Movie and really just coming out with a bang. This movie, I think, is the better one to remember her by. But
Sure.
I think about her comedic timing, her comedic delivery in this movie, and it actually takes me to my favorite scene. And it's such a small one. It's so insignificant. I feel like we've already talked about so many great ones already, even just with the fucking kills that we've had.
I know.
But I think just a good place to mention this, and it's also terrible. God, I fucking feel awful saying it. But it's the Jennifer Love Hewitt. What are you waiting for? She walks out of the school not realizing what's going on, and then this guy's like, "Oh, what am I waiting for? I'll show you what I'm waiting for." And then just,
oh my God,
I want to believe at the height at which he jumped from, and his body. Like, thank God this movie isn't so fucking gory, right? I think that could have been a big splatter moment in modern horror.
Yeah.
And I want to think of it as like cartoon character jumps off the fucking building and like gets flattened but is okay. But holy shit, for there to be that instant reaction to such a weird fucking moment. And think about that moment, and I Know What You Did Last Summer was only in there because a kid won a fucking contest. A kid directed that fucking scene, and then, that's what it's translated to in Scary Movie years later.
Yep. It's really crazy to think about, but it's what makes this movie and this franchise special, right? Because it's literally, it's forcing laughs out of you in moments where you probably wouldn't be laughing, right? Like, it's putting you in an uncomfortable situation, but also making you have a little fun with it and laugh even though you're not even intending to. And there's so many of those little moments throughout the film. I loved the little Dawson's Creek plug. That was fucking hilarious, right? When he just like shows up in the window and he's like, oh, like wrong set, wrong window. You know what I mean? And the song hits. Like, that was great because Dawson's Creek was fucking huge at that time. Crazy. Absolutely crazy.
I think Anna Faris delivers some of the best pieces of this movie. There's the moments with her, with Cindy and her father that are just so weird and humorous.
Oh my God.
It's their delivery of their lines and how they're just able to kind of go back and forth smoothly as if everything they're saying is completely normal and cutesy. And it's utterly ridiculous to imagine this is her dad, the drug dealer, and he's so sweet with her about everything and giving her instruction on how to shield him from the cops. But everything about that, like very beginning of the movie, and of course, right at the end, we get that flanked, and I don't know, I really enjoy that.
Yeah, it's fucking funny. And there's the fucking classroom scene, which was also really wild, where the teacher is talking to the class about like prayer while holding a fucking baby that she passed to its father, who was a student in the class, and then proceeds to hit on the kid next to him and says, "I'll see you after class." Like, what kind of fucked up situation is happening in this class? But that was fucking hilarious the way it progressed.
Yeah, okay, but commentary on the fucked up situations is also, again, where the comedy hits in this movie. And it's like, it's laughing, but it's like, we shouldn't be fucking laughing because this shit's real. Because it is the, we need prayer, and then fucking contradiction right there. A fucking predator, right? And it's those who fucking do this shit that are going to call for more prayer. It's crazy. But then there was a separate moment where Anna Faris is trying to fucking type 911 like Sydney and scream. And then she types, "White woman in trouble, cops instantly there."
Instantly
there.
Yep. I mean, I think if nothing else, right? Watching this movie so many times now, like really dissecting it and talking about it with y'all, like, I feel like it is literally, it is definitely just talking about like society and how fucked up it is. And sometimes in these fucking things, like, all you can do is laugh sometimes because you can't do anything else, right? Like, and I think like that's just fucking crazy, man. But like, it is one of those things where it's like, man, there are a lot of fucked up things happening, but it's forcing you to laugh at some of this stuff. And that's where a lot of the comedy comes from in this movie. Yeah,
I think that's the thing about horror. There's a lot of talk these days, and I think even the director of Terrifier kind of got into some water on this one, where they say that horror is not political. But horror as a genre has been saying shit about current events. Horror shows us a mirror that reflects back whatever the fuck is going on with society in the moment. And this particular horror comedy does that tenfold. It just tries to have a good time with it too.
Yeah. There was so much shit happening when this movie came out that, You had to start poking fun at some of this shit. There was the scene with the sheriff that was supposed to be showing Cindy pictures of like people, and he just pulls out his own pictures of him in a Speedo posing, and he just keeps going through them, and she's like, no, that's nope. And he's like, really? Not this one? Like, what the
sure?
what the fuck? What the fuck?
Yeah, it's a big what the fuck moment.
Mm-hmm,
but I think that's again how all these characters bring such charm, right? We talked about Marlon Wayans, we talked about Sean Wayans, we talked about Anna Faris, we talked about Regina Hall, we talked about Shannon Elizabeth. There's a lot in here, and if Binks were here, I know she would say the ensemble was ensembling. I think if you take any one of these folks out from this movie just doesn't also feel or hit the same. And
very true.
I think, this is probably a good time as any to talk about it. Someone who hasn't gotten a lot of attention here, who I know that our Discord server is going to be bringing up a lot, Dave Sheridan is Doofy.
Yeah. This is one of the characters where I feel like I kind of have a tough time with now, right? Like maybe as a teenager, I was like, oh, this is really funny. But I feel like now that's like one of the more like cringy moments of the film, right? Because you're really poking fun at mentally handicapped people, right? And like that's just kind of fucked up, one. And two, it's also like really shitting on David Arquette's character, which I feel like is not that, you know what I mean? And I know we're playing heavily. I don't think I guess it's playing heavily into like maybe a hint of what that character, I don't know, but
yeah,
it's one of the cringier moments of the film, that character, I feel like, for me, between Doofy and the gym coach, like those are the two cringiest parts of this film.
100%. And I would actually agree that both of them are the worst parts of this movie. But here's the thing. I love the name Doofy. I just wish they went a different fucking direction with him. Because Deputy Doofy fucking works. Because Deputy Dewey in Scream is pretty fucking Deputy Doofy. But I think even if they played Dewey as exactly the same, but like 2% more goofy, then I think it'd be fine. But to go quite as hard the direction as they went, and then also for them to have the fucking reveal that they do at the end, it's just, I don't know. It surprised me. Caught me off guard.
Very surprising.
Like, wow, you guys are really just making that all a fucking act. It's kind of crazy.
Very surprising. And I also have heard over the years people saying like, oh yeah, Scream, that's where like Dewey is the killer. And I'm like, no, motherfuckers. That's Scary Movie, and it's not Dewey, it's Doofy.
But imagine if they came back with Scary Movie. Oh my gosh, not Scary Movie. If they came back in Scream 5 Cream, or fucking Scream 6, and Dewey somehow didn't die in Scream 5, but then ended up being the fucking killer.
I mean, if that happens, we have now come full circle. Imagine if that happens, somehow they bring this character back and he becomes the killer. That would be wild.
Art imitates life, imitating art.
Yeah, absolutely wild. I thought I was actually thinking, because we haven't really brought Brenda up a lot. I thought we were about to talk about Brenda, because I think Brenda, deserves a lot of great recognition as a character in this film, because there's we've talked about Shorty, Ray, we've talked about Cindy, right? We've talked about all these characters have added some great comedy, but I think that, and you touched on like moments with Ray maybe being better because of Brenda and her reactions, but I think Brenda as a character is fucking fantastic. The theater scene is fucking fantastic. I think half of this movie is better because of Brenda in it.
Totally agreed. I think Brenda's delivery as well, just like absolutely fantastic. The characters that she's portraying on screen, that has to be a lot of fun to be in those moments where you're like, I'm going to be this annoying person, perhaps the person that annoys me, but also the person that some of us just are sometimes. It's great.
Yeah, absolutely.
I really enjoyed her. Sean, I agree with you. I think she's kind of the rock that holds everything in this movie together, comedy-wise. Because I think Cindy doesn't work without her. I think Ray doesn't really work without her. I think a lot of their commentary, like I'm thinking about the reverse striptease where he gets more turned on and
as she's putting shit on.
Yeah, it's fucked up. It's really fucked up. And
putting the helmet on.
You know, and the other thing is like looking at, I don't know that the theater scene ages well. I don't like it. And actually, where she is very funny in that scene, it was hard for me to fully watch it and engage it because I didn't love it. That moment was just hard to watch. I think because we see, and there's a lot that goes into the dynamics of it, right? But we see like Jada Pinkett's character in Scream 2 get killed and everybody's watching thinking it's fake. And then for the whole crowd to turn on her there, this is another one of those moments that hits one way in 2000. But if you watch this anytime recently, it's like, okay.
Yeah.
I think she was at her best, honestly, when she was partnered with Ray. The back and forth between them, that was good because her reactions to anything he said that was sus was so brilliant and like gave us so much emotion on screen. And then when they tried to really lean into the idea of her being like on her own and just being an annoying person, that's when it was kind of like, this isn't really funny. Mm-hmm. She's the funniest when she's being the girlfriend who doesn't want to see the obvious.
Yeah.
Even in the beginning, she's really funny when we first see Shannon Elizabeth's character show up and she's showing, these two sides to her and how she's meshing into this friend group. Even that was good.
Yeah. I love that scene that followed right after what you're talking about too, where Shannon Elizabeth as Buffy is like talking about how she loves to help people. And this homeless person comes up to her and is asking for money. She's like, ew, get away from me. That was a good slapstick moment right there for sure. But I do think, Chris, it sounds like we're probably going to be aligned. I do think that the worst part of this movie is probably for me 100% the portrayal of mentally handicapped individuals and transgender people, right? Like those are the two worst parts of this movie because as much as they wanted to make it a joke, it's just not a joke that works. And it didn't work then. It doesn't really work now. But I think as maybe like you're watching it in the 2000s as a fucking teenage boy who is living with this kind of stuff, it probably was funny at the time, admittedly, right? But like now watching it over the years, it's like, that doesn't seem right.
Yeah. I think I would agree with you, right? Like these are the categories of things that I have personally never found funny. It's like, okay, it's that. Don't joke about the gays. Don't make fat jokes. Don't make fun of trans people. And don't talk about anybody who's on the fucking spectrum in some way, right? Or has different accessibility needs. Those are the things that, and I'm not saying that comedians can't fucking touch whatever they want to touch. Y'all do you. For me, it's just not something that has ever really made me laugh, except for Ray in this movie because he made me laugh. But by and large, it is absolutely one of those. But let me tell you what I do think is a positive here. If you had asked me in the year 2000 how scared I would have been to say anything about me being who I am, I would have thought, wow, my life is fucking over. I will never be able to fucking like come out or do anything. Right? You know what I mean? Like, not that a lot of this even applies to me, but to know that we are in a day in 2025 that I think as a collective, we can all look back and say, yeah, the movie was funny. Yeah, it's also fucked up. Yeah, that's not funny in retrospect. I'm very happy that we're at that moment versus still living in the day where, yeah, this is fucking super common and we all think this shit is hilarious.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I think where it falls short, the entire film, is when it goes off track. When it's following the gag the whole way through, it's funny. The jokes make sense. The story works. For some reason, a spoof has actually a story that works from start to finish. When it goes off into these little side bits that don't really seem plugged into anything, that's where it actually loses a lot of its comedy. And it goes into the smallest of things. It likes to make a lot of references. It references The Matrix. But when it tries to reference The Matrix too long, it gets dumb. What are we doing? Like an Irish jig or something in midair instead of just dodging bullets and whatnot. And it was like, that's not funny anymore. Like it was funny when you do the bullet dodging thing because we had just saw The Matrix and it was like in pop culture and like, we get it. And then you keep going and now, okay, like we need to move on. And I think it does that in a lot of parts. It makes references that aren't clear enough. And so when it's trying to land a joke, we don't even know what the joke is about because it's so vague. It's like, I get maybe the filmmakers thought we would get it, but instead it's just reading as like silly or dumb or bad taste. I think it has a lot of those moments that we can look back at now and think like, these just don't work. Why did you even bother? And I'm sure if the filmmakers went back and looked at it, they would probably cut out or change so much because they could see it with 20 years of hindsight. I wish they saw it back then. The problem is for this franchise, I've seen clips of other films. I haven't seen them all, though. I honestly have only seen this one in its entirety. I feel like a lot of them went into that as their entire runtime. That was the whole movie, was cram as many references as we can into the film and don't follow that storyline. And then, you can make a joke about anything and everything. Just throw it in there, throw it together, and we'll ship it on the DVD. And that's where you lose me. When you follow the teen slashers from the 90s and you put it into a comedic aspect and you keep the same characters throughout, like, okay, I'm here for that. Just keep it simple and make the jokes land.
Max out here like, don't add too many seasonings to my spaghetti.
Yeah.
But this is almost like, you have you have seasoning. Let's go with that analogy, right? And so if you're making a steak, you have some flavors to go really well with steak. Like, awesome. I'm here for it. And this is just somebody going like, oh, let me dump everything in the cabinet on it because some seasonings are good. That must mean every seasoning is great. But that's just not how it works. Steak needs a certain type of seasoning to go well with it. And so they need to stay simple, stay true. I'm not saying that you have to watch yourself on every single topic. You've mentioned, Chris, there are some topics that just really aren't funny. And if 10% of people laugh at them, like, that's fine. They can go laugh at them in their own time. This is a movie that all of us should be able to get in on and enjoy.
Yeah. I mean, let's be real. The filmmakers didn't have the gift of foresight to know that 12 years after this movie came out, the makers of The Matrix would come out as trans. Like, these are just things that, who knows what's being made today that the perspective or lens will change on later, right? Think about Harvey Weinstein and think about how long that was happening and how different films, we talked about it with Planet Terror, how much that changes the way we look at certain films. Jeepers Creepers, I think, is another example of that, right? And so I think this is one of those, not to say that a comedy that pokes fun at some things is anywhere near the level of the offenses of Harvey Weinstein or the director of Jeepers Creepers. Not to say that, but I think it's like walking hand in hand, and there's like a balancing act here. Like, what are you going to look at from these movies? And honestly, I'll say this. I thought this movie was really fucking funny. I did laugh less out loud the second time I watched it. So I watched it a year ago-ish. Watched it again for the podcast recently. I don't know how funny it's going to be if I continue watching it, so I need to pace it out for a while. I do plan on doing some kind of binge watch before Scary Movie 6 comes out, though.
Yeah, I mean, I think a binge watch before Scary Movie 6 sounds pretty good. I've watched this movie a dozen times or more, and I will no doubt find myself watching this one again. There's still enough great parts of this film that are worth continuing to watch over the years. It's not an every year kind of film for me, but I always find my way back to it somehow. And I think as we maybe progress through this franchise as a podcast, or we watch these films for fun in our personal lives, I do think Scary Movie 2 is another iconic one that I can't wait to get into. The rest of the franchise, it does start to go a little downhill, but we'll see where it takes us.
I'm really curious to see where things take us because, like I said, I haven't watched them all. I've only seen clips of some of them. And, I hope that the other films also have little nuggets of goodness. I know that they're not start to finish great, but I'm hopeful that there's some chuckles to be had. In terms of rewatching this, I'm sure I will at some point. It's probably honestly been a good 10 years since the last time I did. There was a while where I probably watched it once a year, but that was 20 years ago. So I think once every now and then is the most we're going to get.
Well, we'll see if we cover more ground before Scary Movie 6 comes out. But for now, there you have it, folks. Scary Movie, the one that started it all, has earned a universal slash in spite of its poorly aged humor. Now, we certainly had a robust discussion here, but the conversation doesn't end here by any means.
If you loved the show and want to find out how you can go further than this episode, consider supporting the show by visiting patreon.com/hackerslash. This is where you can enjoy even more of the show, including bonus content with early access, extended episodes, movie nominations, and live shows.
And if Scary Movie is your favorite scary movie, leave us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. This helps us continue to deliver great content for all you horror fiends out there.
We'll see you next time, folks. And remember, we all go a little crazy sometimes.
And don't forget to flush your stash.